was beheaded in 49. And this was in a time period of a civil war within England. And England was without a king for a period of time. His son, Charles II, was restored to the throne in 60. Rewarding his friends, Charles II is going to give a proprietary grant of land to 8 proprietors who will establish a colony that they name after him called Carolina. Now, the proprietors don't go to Carolina until 1670. When they do, they kind of bring with them their association with Barbados. How so? What happens in Carolina? Amanda, right? Samantha. Darn it. Go ahead. Why couldn't they grow sugar in South Carolina? Pardon me? Yes, it was too cold. Too cold to grow sugar in the southern part of Carolina. Too hot to grow tobacco in the southern part of Carolina. And so they experiment with a number of things. They sell Indian slaves. They sell deer hide. They try to do cattle. But eventually, what do they come up with? Oh, look. Oh, Kendrick, you're all over this.
Oh, yeah.
Rice, right? And remember, the rice plantations of Southern Carolina are the largest, most prosperous plantations in all of colonial America. Now, in our class, dear friends, we did not talk about the foundation of Georgia. But there is a question on the test about that. So you should review that in your textbooks, the foundation of Georgia. Now, with Georgia, how does North Carolina and South Carolina become separate? North Carolina and South Carolina eventually become separate. How so, dear friends? I mean, Carolina is established. The southern part of Carolina is eventually where Charlestown is established. Charlestown becomes the hub of the colony. But eventually, North Carolina takes on a separate identity from the southern part of Carolina. And that those dual identities are confirmed by the king eventually when he takes over the colony and creates royal colonies of North and South Carolina. How does that happen? Anybody recall besides the instructor? Is there anyone that recalls this besides the instructor? North and South Carolina. Go ahead, Al John.
Most of the people in South Carolina were like rich plantation owners.
Well, I mean, Southern Carolina was dominated by some wealthy plantation owners. The people that went to the northern part of Carolina, who were they?
Squatters.
Yes, they were squatters that came down from Virginia, small farmers, religious dissidents, other people that sought someplace to settle, and they took on a separate identity. South Carolina was far more aristocratic, North Carolina far more egalitarian. Now, after we leave the Carolinas and Georgia, we go up to New England. And when we go up to New England and the establishment of the New England colonies, what's central to that is the Protestant Reformation, Calvinism, and the relationship between the Protestant Reformation, Calvinism, in England. How does England become a Protestant nation? How does England become a Protestant nation? Ways, go ahead, let it fly. How does England become a Protestant nation? Go ahead. No, go ahead, Ways, let it fly.
Which one?
Well, your buddy, your brother's soccer player with the sporty jacket is there. Go ahead, Polymechko. How does England become a Protestant nation? Listen carefully to this response. It's going to be insightful. Go ahead, Polymechko.
King Henry divorced his wife, and so in order to do that, they had to have the consent of the Pope, which the Pope didn't want to. So they broke away from the Catholic Church and made their own Anglican Church.
I hate to say this, Polymechko, but that's a pretty strong explanation. It's a pretty good explanation. Polymechko, if you did not hear, he gave a very nice explanation how ultimately England became Protestant because of a dispute that Henry VIII was having with the Pope over the divorce of his queen. And in an effort to sort of divorce his queen, he proclaims the Church of England to be separate from the Church of Rome. In doing so, the Church of England becomes a Protestant church. Because by definition, if you're not Catholic, you're Protestant. And so now England is separated from the church at Rome, creating the Church of England, and the Church of England, often called the Anglican Church. Now, at first, the Church of England was separate in name only. The Church of England was separate in leadership at name only. Henry VIII, the king, was the head of the church. He appointed the bishops, the head bishop, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and basically had control of the church's assets and things of that nature. But they basically did the same thing that they had done when they were Catholic. Same Mass, same liturgy, same, Eucharist, everything the same. Now, there were Protestants who followed Calvin that had a different approach to Christianity. And those Protestants that followed Calvin, believed in predestination, a more simplistic church service that focused on the Bible and sermons and a number of other things. Those Protestants wanted the Church of England to go further away from Catholicism. They wanted to purify the Church of England of all the vestiges of Catholicism. Hence, they were called Puritans. Right? And those Puritans are crucial to the settlement of New England. Hey, just for fun, what was the difference between a Puritan and a separatist? What was the difference between a Puritan and a separatist? Go ahead.
Separatists are like more extreme.
Well, that's one way to put it. Separatists were more extreme. Somebody had their hand. Go ahead.
Separatists wanted to separate from the church completely.
Yes. The separatists believed the Church of England was absolutely hopeless. No way to fix it. And so they wanted to separate entirely. And the Pilgrims, the group that we call the Pilgrims, were separatists. The people that migrated to Massachusetts Bay were Puritans. Oh, what was their leader's name? Their leader that led the Great Migration that we mentioned, delivered that sermon on the Arabella. Do you remember, does anyone besides Kelly and myself remember that leader's name? Go ahead, Kelly, tell me. Go ahead. Your response will be on the World Wide Web in seconds, Kelly. Yes, John Winthrop. John Winthrop was one of the leaders. That type of enthusiasm is infectious, isn't it, Thomas? Right? Yes, John Winthrop was one of the leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Company, which was the joint stock company that was formed to establish the colony that became Massachusetts Bay. It was Winthrop who sort of sets out the parameters of the mission. We are going there to establish a city on a hill, a glimmering example to the world of what a society based on the premises of Calvinistic Christianity can look like. And so Winthrop is the leader of this endeavor, and we talked about the settlement of Massachusetts Bay. We talked about the Great Migration and why all of those Puritans came over. Persecution, attempting to be part of the mission, fear that England was going to be punished. But we also said that this sense of mission was tied to a feeling of unity. Everyone had to join together, and Winthrop mentions this in his sermon. Hey, here's a question for you. I don't think this is on the test. But what was the name of that sermon that he delivered on the Arabella? What was the name of that? I don't even know that I mentioned it, but it was on the paper. Anybody remember the name of that sermon that he delivers on the Arabella? Yes. Yes, it was indeed called A Model of Christian Charity. A model of Christian charity. That might not be on the test, Keith, but that's still good stuff to know. It's still good stuff to know because it's important things. Now, a model of Christian charity. Now, McMaster's. Massachusetts Bay, unity was important. Unity of purpose was important. But the question became, what happened if people disagreed with those who sort of outline the parameters of the mission.